Namaste and welcome to another episode of the Yinning at Life podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Roberts of SolefulYin, and I'm here to dish out all things about traditional Chinese medicine, yin yoga, reflexology, healthy living, and of course, mindset shifting. So today's topic is all about resistance. I want to talk about this resistance that we put up when we're on the mat and then we carry it out into our actual life. Yeah. So resistance. I want you to think of resistance as kind of like a cement block. And you literally are putting it up in front of you, okay? And your energy emits that resistance. So it's kind of like almost like it's a boomerang, right? So your energy, what you put out is what you get back. So when we resist in yin yoga poses, and I'll talk about what resistance kind of is like in a yin pose, okay? When we put up that resistance, our energy picks up the fact that we are resisting something. And then that is what is put out into the world. And then the boomerang effect comes in and we get resistance back, okay? So in a yin pose, what will often happen is, especially if you're taking a class and, everybody has their yin poses that they quote unquote absolutely love. And then they have the ones where when they hear the teacher say what the pose is, they literally cringe. And they're like, oh, I don't want to do that pose. I hate that pose. Right there, you're creating resistance. And I'll tell you that often what you resist persists, but what you resist in yin is often what you need the most. So, many of my students resist dragon pose, which is like a low lunge, right? It's a really intense hip opener. And for a lot of people, especially serial sitters that sit all day long, that area of the body gets super tight and creates hip tension, knee tension, low back tension, even create ankle tension, affects your gait, right? Affects your posture. And so a lot of students really can't stand that pose. I personally love that pose. But I have my poses that I don't like either. Now, sometimes we don't like a pose because our body can't get into a position where it feels comfortable enough. And I'll give you an example of that. So for me, saddle pose, so if you've never done saddle pose, just let me explain it for you and you can get a visualization, okay? So saddle, you're sitting between your heels. So your bum is between your heels, okay? And you start to lay back onto your back, okay? So you're laying flat on your back. Your bum is between your heels, right? And your knees are bent. So it's an intense quad opening pose. For me, it doesn't work. I have to be super propped up. Like I have to have so much propping underneath my seat, but also behind my back because it just doesn't work for my body, okay? And honestly, it's mostly because I hit a compression point where I hit the femur bone against the hip bone and my body just doesn't or isn't able to go back any further. And that's okay. I mean, I know that because I'm a yin yoga teacher and I know all about anatomy and compression and what happens when, bone hits bone, like you're not going any further than that. So that's your full range of motion and flexibility in that pose. If, say you've been practicing for years and you're never getting further ahead, it's like, well, you probably hit compression. And that's okay, because as I often say in yin, it's not about what the pose looks like. It's about how do you feel in the pose. And if you're feeling resistance right away, that tells me you need to prop up more. You need to support your body more because your body is resisting the push that you are trying to invoke in your body in order to get a deeper stretch. And I'll tell you right now, yin is not so much about the stretch. Sure, it's great to get a stretch of your quads and your hips and whatever, okay? It's really beneficial, but The main reason why we do yin is more for the flexibility of the mind, the stillness, the calmness that we can create in our mind. That's how I approach yin. And you know what? My approach is not bad. It's not good. It's just different. And everybody practices the way that resonates most with them, and in a way where they're not creating resistance. So resistance, like I said before, looks like you're pushing too hard in a pose and you start to get frustrated. Well, why can't I sit still? Why can't I go any deeper in this pose? Why is this really uncomfortable? Why do I keep fidgeting? Why do I keep moving? Why do I keep getting distracted by my mind, by thoughts? It's all because you're creating resistance. Firstly, probably because you're not propped up enough. So prop yourself up more and then just see, does that make a difference? If it does, great. You've eliminated that part of the resistance, okay? That's the physical part. You've propped yourself up more. Now, another form of resistance is what comes up in the mind. So we get into the practice. The idea of yin is to be still. It's to be contemplative, introspective, right? For a lot of people, that just doesn't work. The mind is like a hamster running around on a wheel. And it's like, well, I can't quiet my mind. I can't calm it down. So instead of trying and utilizing the breath to anchor yourself, what people end up doing is they start to fidget, they start to move, they start to think of the thoughts, and then they start to really contemplate the thoughts. And it just sends them into a spiraling action of resistance, right? The mind is resisting being quiet. I will tell you that your mind is not literally and chemically designed to be quiet. It's not. It's always out there seeking danger. That is what the mind is programmed for. But, you know, like I often say to my students, your mind is not like your iPhone where, you know, every once in a while you get a software update that gets downloaded from the iOS store, right, to your computer or to your laptop or your phone, whatever device you have. Okay, those happen automatically with your devices. But with your brain, it doesn't. You actually have to do a manual update and a manual upgrade, and often, because otherwise you are literally living with the primal brain that you were born with, which we need, right? We need to have that primal instinct of survival. But there's a fine line between that level of activity in your mind versus I'm just going to be calm and still. I'm safe. I'm okay. So that's the mind resistance. Now, the last part is the emotional resistance. So one thing that some students aren't aware of in yin yoga is that yin is all about emotional awareness and release. Your emotions are meant to move through you. They're not meant to be they're not meant to be stored or trapped inside your body. They are meant to move. You are meant to feel your emotions. You are meant to acknowledge them. You are meant to process them. You are meant to release them. And when we don't, when we're in the practice and even off the mat as well, if we resist the emotion that's coming up, we just shove it and push it back down, then we're creating another cement wall in front of us and the emotions don't move. And then that's what happens. They stay stored in the body. And in particular, according to Chinese medicine, they get stored in our organs. And if we're not dealing with them, what happens eventually is the body just goes, you know what, I've had enough. And it implodes upon itself. And that's where you get these massive emotional crises. But they can be avoided by allowing yourself to acknowledge that, hey, I'm angry today, or hey, I'm scared, or I'm worried, or you know what, I'm really grateful, I'm really joyful or happy today, right? Like in Chinese medicine, I say this all the time. Our emotions are not good, they're not bad, they're neutral. They're just indicators of where you are at. But if you're in the lower end of that scale in like fear, worry, anger, then you are certainly putting up that cement block in front of you and creating so much resistance, which is actually just making it harder for you to heal. And that's the whole thing about this entire conversation, this whole episode today, is to talk about letting go of the resistance, because what resists persists. So if you keep resisting the physical stretch that's too intense, if you keep resisting the emotion coming up, if you keep resisting, the attempt at quieting your mind, all of it is just going to come flooding right back into you. And it's only going to be 10 times worse. So how do we do this? How do we deal with the resistance? We take the cement block down. When we're in a yin pose, we physically prop ourselves up so that we feel safe enough, but yet we can feel a stretch. When we are properly supported using blocks, props, whatever you've got at home, what happens? Your body starts to settle into the stillness. Your mind begins to realize that you're safe and that you're okay. So it can start to get a little bit calmer and a little bit quieter. And then emotionally, maybe what is stored inside of you may start to come up for contemplation, process, and release. But if we can just accept that wherever we are at in the moment is okay, and that it is going to change, it is going to shift, because everything always does. Nothing is permanent. Then we can start to dismantle the resistance. And when you dismantle that resistance on the mat, guess what happens off the mat? The same thing. You resist less. You're more accepting. You're more, I'm going to go with the flow kind of vibe, that energy. And then guess what? That's the energy you put out into the world is, I trust, I am in flow, I accept. And guess what? Boomerangs right back to you from the universe. The same thing. In flow, acceptance, letting go, trust, right? And then you start to get more experiences like that. But if you keep resisting the physical stretch, if you keep resisting your mind, and if you keep resisting your emotions, you're only going to send out resistance, an energy of resistance, and that is what you are going to receive back. So more opportunities and more experiences where you get to resist. And that's really as simple as it is. So use your yin practice as an opportunity, as a tool, as a catalyst for breaking down the resistance that, you put up yourself, because we are so perfectly programmed to resist. It is our human nature to resist. So start using your yin practice to unresist, to trust, to accept, to let go, to make peace, and to create that yinning at life vibe. So thank you so much for pressing play on today's episode. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Namaste.